There are two sides to being wealthy. How you spend it is the first side, but the other side is how you keep it. And once you get to a certain level of wealth, you gain access to the wealth preservation strategies that are not open to everyone. In this video, I'm going to reveal how you can use some little-known financial strategies not accessible to everyone to grow and protect your wealth. Before I dive right in, my name is Daniel O'Loughlin. I'm a wealth manager for high net worth individuals, entrepreneurs, and high-performance founders. So the first thing we're going to talk about today are Freeports, the Millionaires' safe house for assets. Freeports are high-security, tax-free zones designed to store mostly valuable assets like fine art, jewellery, vintage cars, and historical artefacts. These facilities are usually located in major financial hubs such as Switzerland, Luxembourg, and Singapore. Assets can be stored here, and as they appreciate in value, they don't incur taxes because legally they actually haven't entered the host country's market. The largest and probably most well-known Freeport is the Geneva Freeport in Switzerland. It's home to over 1,000 works of Picasso, and it also houses paintings from the likes of Da Vinci and Renoir. It's home to some of the most expensive art in the world. So here's how it works. To use Freeports, you buy your asset and you arrange for it to be stored directly in a Freeport. For most Freeports, the cost is usually quite reasonable. For example, in Luxembourg, you could store a standard painting for about €4 per day. And then if you have a larger collection or a larger item, such as a vintage car, you can get a 20 square metre unit for approximately €3,000 per month. Now, in this facility, your asset can grow tax-free. And if you need liquidity, you can actually borrow against it rather than selling. Many private banks and financial institutions offer loans against stored assets in Freeports, turning illiquid investments into a cash machine without triggering taxes. As long as the items remain in the facility, owners are not required to pay import taxes or custom duties, while in the warehouse, items are considered in transit. So, for an example, a $1 million painting has been purchased in New York. Tagged onto this price is a $100,000 sales tax bill. However, this bill disappears when the painting is actually shipped to a Freeport and remains suspended until the artwork actually leaves the warehouse. So that's an additional $100,000 in freed up capital that you can use for additional investing. So the overall advantages to using a Freeport include tax-free growth, since assets appreciate without triggering taxes. Secondly, security. There is usually high-level surveillance and climate control to protect your valuables. And then finally, you get privacy, since a lot of the ownership details can be shielded through offshore companies and trusts. Now, the next concept we're going to talk about is borrowing against assets. This strategy involves using appreciating assets as collateral for loans. By doing so, you can access liquidity without triggering a capital gains tax event. Assets like real estate, stock, and even fine art can be used as collateral to secure loans at low interest rates, allowing you to use these loans as capital for, let's say, making additional investments. So here's how it works. Most private banks, including JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, offer security-backed lines of credit to their high net worth clients. So step one would involve pledging the assets you want to use, so the likes of stocks, real estate, or fine art. And the next step is that you're allowed to borrow usually from 50% up to 80% of the value of the assets. The loan that you receive on the back of that collateral is usually at an interest rate of between 1% and 3%. And then step 3 is where you can use the borrowed money to, for example, reinvest or fund a tax-free lifestyle. An example of someone that I know that used this was that they solely used a security-backed line of credit to fund their entire life for over 3 years. Therefore, they didn't have to pay any tax over that time. Then, after the 3 years, he changed his country of tax residency to a country of zero tax jurisdiction, and then at that point decided to repay the loan, which now wouldn't incur capital gains tax, since the country he's in doesn't apply that. So by living off a security-backed line of credit, he was able to live as if he was in a tax-free jurisdiction, even though he wasn't, until the time came that it suited him to actually make the move. So overall, the benefits are, firstly, tax efficiency, since there's no capital gains tax on borrowed funds. Another benefit is the continued growth of the assets that you do have, since you would expect that the assets you have used as collateral continue to appreciate in value while also providing this liquidity. And then finally, you get low-cost borrowing, since you can get the interest rates from 1% to 3%. Now imagine how beneficial this can be if you want to use this capital for further investing. So let's say the interest rate is 3% and the stock market is giving you back 8%. The difference is a relatively low risk return that you get. Now the next concept we'll talk about is offsetting capital gains with strategic losses. This is known as tax loss harvesting. The strategy involves selling assets that have declined in value, which technically locks in a tax loss for you. And then you can buy into the same investment, so you actually end up maintaining your original investment portfolio. By realizing these losses strategically at the right time, you can reduce your taxable income sometimes to zero. A 2020 paper from MIT found that this tax loss harvesting strategy increases annual investment returns by about 1% annually. I left a link in the description to the paper if you'd like to read it. So here's actually how you apply that. So step 1 is to review your portfolio coming up to the tax year end, and you want to identify any loss-making assets. Then step 2 is to sell these assets to create tax-deductible losses. Now, an important note to mention here is that some countries, like the US, have what's called a wash sale rule, which tries to stop you from doing this. The wash sale rule prevents investors from claiming this tax-deductible loss if they repurchase the same asset within 30 days. But you can circumvent this with a loophole. Let's say you want to capture a tax loss on, let's say, some Apple stock that you might own. Rather than buy the exact same asset after you capture that tax loss, you buy a related but technically different asset, like an Apple call option. So overall, the benefits to this are tax savings, since you can reduce your taxable income significantly. There's also portfolio optimization, where you can clear out the underperforming assets if you decide not to repurchase them to maintain your portfolio as the same. And then there's also forward planning benefits, where sometimes losses can be carried forward to subsequent years. Now, another private wealth strategy involves changing your residency or citizenship. This is a more obvious one, but it's also one of the more significant strategies. Changing your citizenship or residency can result in you in having zero or low tax rates. Popular options include Dubai, Monaco, and Panama, where their tax systems legally reduce or completely eliminate many forms of taxes that you otherwise would have to pay. So here's how it works. There are a few ways to go about this. The easiest way is to just apply for citizenship or residency through investment, which usually just means you need to buy a home or invest in a business in the country of choice. In most eligible countries, the minimum is usually around $250,000 to get citizenship. Now, alternatively, you can just live in a place for sometimes between 3 to 6 months, usually on average, and you are automatically granted residency, which is usually enough to avoid the tax situation in your own country. Now, some countries do operate a domicile rule, which adds some complexities, but your lawyer or tax advisor should be able to assist with this. So the benefits overall include tax optimization, political and financial security, and finally international access, since some residencies and passports give additional international travel benefits. Now let's talk about offshore trusts. Asset protection trusts in jurisdictions like the Cook Islands and Nevis are designed to shield wealth from lawsuits, creditors, and even divorce settlements. These trusts operate under some of the most protective trust laws globally, making it nearly impossible for assets to be seized once they're actually transferred. Courts in the US, UK, and the EU have no jurisdiction over these trusts, making them a favourite for the ultra-wealthy. So here's how it works. Firstly, you set up a trust. You can start by setting this up somewhere like the Cook Islands or Nevis. A trust is basically a legal way to protect your assets and money by putting them under the control of somebody else, called a trustee, who manages it for you. So after the trust is set up, you transfer your money, property, or other valuables into it. Now, it's important to do this as soon as possible because the trust won't protect assets if a legal case occurs before you move the assets. And then finally, you get your legal protection. So if somebody does try to sue you, they would have to go through the courts in the Cook Islands or Nevis to try and get to your assets. And these places have special rules that make it really hard for outsiders to win. In the Cook Islands, for example, creditors, or the people that want your money, only have 1 year from the time that you put your assets into the trust to file a lawsuit. And they also need to prove that you moved the assets there to try and cheat them. So in simple terms, if you set up everything legally, correctly, and early enough, these trusts make it almost impossible for anyone to take your assets through a lawsuit. And you also get privacy, since ownership details often remain confidential, and you get estate planning, where wealth can be passed on without interference. The next concept we'll talk about is shadow banking through private debt investments. So what is this? Shadow banking is essentially defined as non-bank financial companies like private debt funds and hedge funds that provide loans outside of the traditional banking industry. High net worth individuals get access to investments in this area, which provides higher returns compared to traditional bonds, often securing 8 to 12% annually in many cases. This strategy also provides good protection during stock market volatility, since private debt instruments aren't as exposed to stock market fluctuations, so they're an excellent source of diversification. They're also usually collateral backed, so default risk is quite low. The only real negative is that they're not as liquid as investing in bonds, for example. You are investing into a fund, therefore you might not see your money for 5 to 10 years, depending on the company's financial objectives. But you are well compensated for this. The global shadow banking industry is estimated to be worth over $60 trillion, demonstrating its scale and importance for high net worth investors. To invest in private debt, you just need an investment manager who can find suitable funds to invest your money into. And finally, the last concept we'll discuss is getting access to the best investment managers. The ultra-wealthy have access to exclusive investment managers and funds that generally aren't available to the public. By leveraging these top-tier investment managers, you gain access to higher returns, advanced risk management strategies, and sometimes early-stage investment deals that can exponentially grow your wealth. So here's how it works. Getting access to a top-tier investment manager can be difficult. You might find one through personal connections, recommendation, or possibly even through a private bank if you're lucky. Alternatively, you can take advantage of our expertise and track record and apply for access for your own private wealth desk at Seneca Private. If you'd like to learn more, you can click the link in the description or visit senecaprivate.com/apply. So I really hope that our videos are of benefit to you in terms of growing and protecting your wealth. And if you want to see more, hit the subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.